Privyet Druzy, Wes O'Donnell here, veteran of the U.S. Army and the U.S. Air Force, and global security analyst for Eyes Only on Substack. And I speak a little bit of Russian because it is wise to study the ways of one's adversary. Today we're talking about how F-16s sent to Ukraine could stop Russian glide bombs. On November 20th, 2023, Ukrainian intelligence officer Tatarigami UA highlighted the growing threat posed by Russian glide bombs in a short analysis on X. It's definitely worth checking out if you have the time. These bombs, which are essentially retrofitted dumb bombs with wings, lack precision, but cause massive destruction, posing a significant challenge for Ukrainian forces on the front lines. Russian glide bombs are typically 500 to 1,500 kilograms, making them significantly more powerful than a standard 50 kilogram, 152 millimeter artillery shell, by a factor of 10 to 30. Even with the rudimentary guidance systems, these bombs can strike with greater accuracy than a typical artillery barrage. Their large, destructive explosions, like those observed in targeted areas around Avdiivka, are right out of the Russian military playbook of indiscriminate mass destruction. Last fall, there were 45 glide bomb strikes along the Dnipro River in a single week. While this might not seem like a large number, the sheer power of these bombs makes them a massive threat. You can see the mammoth size of the explosions compared to the relative buildings in Avdiivka in this video. Russian glide bombs have a theoretical range of over 50 kilometers, but in combat situations with pilots flying low to avoid Ukrainian air defenses, they seem to be restricted to a release range of around 35 to 40 kilometers. While Ukrainian drones have been effective in targeting Russian armor and destroying new Russian anti-drone electronic warfare systems, and counter-drone battery fire has made Russian artillery cautious, the mass glide bombing campaign remains a serious threat. By looking at where the Russians have been hitting, particularly near Kherson last fall, we can estimate approximately where the Russians are releasing their payloads. 37 of the 45 airstrikes in that week targeted Ukrainian positions on the southern bank of the Dnipro, or within 1 kilometer of the river on the northern bank. The remaining strikes hit targets within 3 kilometers of the river. This pattern indicates that Russian forces are launching glide bombs from around 30 to 35 kilometers behind the front lines, staying just out of range of Ukrainian air defenses. That means that Russia can only hit targets within a few kilometers of the front lines, afraid to strike deeper into Ukrainian territory. To counter the threat of glide bombs, F-16 fighter jets equipped with advanced radar detection and air-to-air weaponry might be the answer. Both Ukraine and Russia deploy various short and mid-range ground missile defense systems close to the front lines to protect against enemy airstrikes. These systems, such as the Buk system, rely heavily on radar detection. And to avoid radar detection, pilots from both sides fly at treetop heights, making it difficult for ground-based radars to detect them. The distance at which an aircraft becomes undetectable to radar due to the curvature of the Earth is known as the radar horizon. Now, radar was kind of my jam in the Air Force, and I'll spare you the math, but this picture does a good job of visualizing the radar horizon. When I served on the E3 Sentry AWACS, our radar horizon was well beyond 250 nautical miles. The actual distance is, of course, classified, but this distance depends on the height of the radar and the altitude of the target aircraft. For example, a radar tower 20 meters tall can detect an aircraft flying at 30 meters high at a distance of about 40 kilometers. However, practical detection ranges are slightly less due to the interference or radar clutter, that's the green stuff in this picture, with Buk systems generally detecting low-flying enemy aircraft at around 35 kilometers, assuming Ukrainian air defenses are set up around 5 kilometers behind the front lines. The 30-kilometer zone into which Russian aircraft dare not fly makes sense. The release point distance is not random. It's just at the edge of the Ukrainian air defense range. So the key to stopping Russian glide bomb attacks all depends on whether Ukraine can extend that range. The fixed nature of the Earth's curvature means that the only variable that can be manipulated is the height of the radar, which is where the F-16s come in. Flying at treetop heights, the F-16s can detect enemy aircraft much further than any surface-to-air missile. The difference is substantial. An F-16 can track an enemy bomber flying at 30 meters from a distance of around 72 kilometers, compared to 40 kilometers for ground-based radars. What's more, the F-16s can carry AMRAAM C-5 and C-7 missiles, which have an engagement range of up to 105 kilometers. While Ukraine is set to receive 61 F-16s this summer, securing these missiles will be crucial. Although the first deliveries of the more advanced AMRAAM D3 or C8 missiles, classified range but thought to be up to 180 kilometers, are not expected until 2026, Ukraine may find allies willing to part of older but still capable C5 and C7 variants. If Ukraine can assemble enough pilots, F-16s with advanced radars, and AMRAAM missiles, this could extend Ukrainian air defense against low-flying bombers by an extra 15 to 20 kilometers, effectively neutralizing Russian bombers in the glide bomb drop zone. But there's one additional technical challenge Ukraine F-16 pilots will have to solve. Because Ukraine will be flying extremely low, there are some difficulties in firing missiles at low altitudes. At these low altitudes, the missiles start in dense air with a lot of aerodynamic drag and must climb against gravity to reach the altitude where their targets are. As a result, by the time their rocket motors burn out after the first few seconds of flight, they have not gained nearly as much speed or altitude as if they were launched from, say, a fighter flying in the thin air at high altitude and at supersonic speeds. Fired from low altitude, a typical missile loses potentially tens of miles off of its range, possibly placing the Russian glide bombers out of reach. The solution is to somehow have the Ukrainian pilots fly deep inside Russian-controlled territory and survive long enough to shoot their missiles. Not the most appealing option. Or we could equip Ukraine with longer-range missiles like the European Meteor, which flies as far as 125 miles under most conditions. However, the Meteor is not compatible with the F-16 without some sort of modification. But it's not impossible given Ukraine's history of MacGyver solutions. So, the too long didn't read version, right now Russian bombers can strike targets up to 5 kilometers behind the front lines with relative impunity. Low-flying F-16s, positioned well behind the front lines, could extend the reach of Ukrainian air defenses by an extra 15 to 20 kilometers, with minimal risk. This would make Russian glide bomber attacks too costly to conduct regularly, particularly in hotly contested areas like the Dnipro riverbank near Kherson. While 60 F-16s may not provide around-the-clock coverage for all 1,000 kilometers of the front lines, they can make a significant impact on key strategic areas. By pushing Russian aircraft out of their glide bomb drop zones, F-16s would help Ukraine counter this significant threat, marking a shift in the war in Ukraine's favor. While some analysts debate about whether Ukraine will use its incoming F-16 shipment offensively or defensively, stopping the Russian glide bombs is a little bit of both. That's it, friends. Subscribe to my newsletter on Substack called Eyes Only. Slava Ukraini. Glory to the heroes.